You would. Uh-oh. It's, it's K. Or yes, it is K, right? I said, oh, Charles. Hi, Vondra. We're still going to wait a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Kay. Good to see ya.
Okay.
Conflict resolution.
Hey, John.
Hi, Joan. Oh, wow.
Welcome, Julia.
Hello.
Julia.
How are you all?
Fine.
We had a little drama getting the meeting started, but
How's my sound?
sounds good.
It's okay? Good. Thank you.
Well, it's only 4 o'clock, so I think you guys are great.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Yes, this has been a shorter day. And yesterday was a much longer one.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh. Yep, people are coming in bulk.
Oh, yeah.
Good,
Becca,
good, good.
John, Rita.
Is there going to be a transcript? I understand something about asking for a transcript at the beginning as opposed to at the end of Zoom. Is that doable, or do we know?
Oh, it's already up. So if you click the transcript function on your, oh, well, you're on your phone. So, but yeah, it's showing for anyone who wants to see it. It's available.
Can you see with the CC live transcript down at the bottom? If you click
Not
that,
on my phone. No, I don't.
oh, that's right. You've got it on
Yes.
the phone. Ooh.
Yes. I'm at bare basics. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a transcript that will be a record of the conversation.
It will be. And
There will be.
Okay.
It'll be videoed.
Okay. Okay. So we can look at that later. That's fine.
Yeah, right. Because yeah, there's lots of stuff in the chat and in the discussion that we'll want to be sure and follow up on.
Good.
Yeah. Here comes John. Okay. All right. We have a phone number 917-297. Is it possible for you to put a name, or could you unmute and tell us your name and we'll change it for you?
Yes, hi, it's Norma from the Westchester community.
Norma, hi.
I'm on my phone. Hi, everyone.
Right.
I'm on my
We're
phone
just going to
tonight.
change your name.
Do it.
And that way everybody will know who it is. And
Okay,
good.
that's fine.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. Nice. Here comes Bert. Yeah, time clocks sometimes are a little out of sync, so we're just going to give everybody a couple of minutes. Linda, Paula, Silicon Valley in the house. Hi, Charles.
Hello.
still got another minute or two. I'm an introvert. I can't keep up the chatter, so feel free to talk if you need to.
Good afternoon, Carolyn.
Good afternoon, Bert.
Hello, Bert.
Hello. It's a hot day in New York.
Oh boy, where's my, one of my favorite pens is just taking a walk. Oh boy.
Nice group at 5 o'clock Eastern. Hope everybody brought their water or preferred beverage of the hour. Yeah, there you go.
Mm,
Healthy.
no, I just have to use another pen.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't know what
this
happened to
must
this
be it.
pen.
All right, so I'll share my screen now and figure out what I'm doing. I think this will be the way to do it. First of all, you're in the right place if this is what you're looking for, the 107th Assembly. This session is called Ethicals and Policymakers, Building Working Relationships. I'm Carolyn Parker, and my partner today is Muriel Tillinghast of the Brooklyn Society, who's going to be sharing her experience and knowledge with us. We're going to do some quick housekeeping. If you haven't already, please put your name in the on the blue bar at the screen so we know who you are and your society if you're a part of a society. Please remember to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Background noises are harder for those of us who have hearing issues, so that's just a kindness. Raise your hand if you want to be recognized for a comment or during the question and answer period. We'd like to see those electronic hands, but we'll look for your waving hand if you are on the phone or can't quite do that. We've got chat enabled, so you're welcome to use that. We're not going to allow everybody to share their screen or files this time because that's dangerous. And just as a reminder that this presentation is being recorded for future viewing. And a really important reminder, which has not been corrected on this, so disregard the second paragraph, but the first paragraph is actually still true, that there are a couple of links that are going to show up in the chat to forms that you can fill out and participation during the session. Jan Broughton from the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle is helping us today with keeping us on track because I can't manage all that stuff. So thank you, Jan. Okay, this program is part of the overall assembly program coming from various committees. This is coming from the Ethical Action Committee. Our job is to help strengthen communities and support local change and also to promote systemic change at the national level. Members of the committee are Jan Broughton, John McCormick, Marta Gutenberg, Utaf Morales, Vandra Thorburn, Dwight Panazzo, Louise Jet, Zia Durrani representing the board, Bart Warden, who's everywhere, Joan Lewis from the National Ethical Service, and Kurt Collier from the National Leaders Council. And there's room for more. So if you have an interest in community strengthening, local change, and systemic change, we're the group for you. We're going to meet this Monday at 2 o'clock, so let me know. Okay, now, just to tell you, you've seen our bios on the website. I'm with the Ethical Society of Austin, and I have some experience, more not a little fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond. I was more like a minnow in a mud puddle with the kinds of work that I did with neighborhood associations and city government and some state and national work on HIV policy in the past. Muriel has a much broader resume than I do. I think when I think of her, I mean, certainly now you know her at the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture and this amazing work she does with Lucy's children, which has been a years-long program there. But I think well, I think the picture you see of Muriel is the picture of a warrior woman. The picture you see of me is an old battle axe. So it's close enough. We're together, and I think it's going to be fun today. Now, why are we here? We talked about this. We had certain ideas. We sort of batted them back and forth. And what we came up with is this statement, which is an amalgam of my thoughts on what we would be talking about today and Muriel's suggestions about what should be there. As ethicals, we can stir thought, ground our position in clear terms relative to particular issues and concerns, serve the movement and allied organizations as a resource, and inform our community by focusing our energy and time on issues and problems at the local level, even when the issues and problems seem to be national and global. People at all levels of government make policy, including elected officials, appointed officials, and professional staff. Lately, you've seen some judges make policy for the country. As citizens, we can become involved in policy making in formal and informal ways. We need to learn how the policy making system works officially and unofficially so that we can participate and impact it effectively. And we thought we might do that in 90 minutes. But then we realized that there was no way we could do it in 90 minutes. So the reality of what we think we're going to try to do today is practice a few or offer a few, very few practical skills, try to refocus our attention at the local level where policy is made, empower you as individuals to tackle your important questions, encourage you in building connections, and set the stage for more workshops and training, because we think that's where our future is going to be. Now we're going to proceed. I'm talking now. Muriel's going to talk. I'm going to talk again. Muriel's going to talk again, and then we're going to open the discussion. And we're going to finally look for ways to have connection and continuation. Actually, we're just going to wing it. We're going to be back and forth and very relaxed and have a good time. So feel free to ask questions and comment as we go through and deal with all these questions that are about to come up. But one more thing before we start. We're in the middle of a planning process with the AEU. And part of that process is that the presidents have been answering questions on a questionnaire. They've met virtually in a planning session. And we've also heard from individuals from various parts of who are not presidents, but members of our member societies. And one of the things that they have called for is more visibility for the ethical culture movement. Why don't more people know about ethical culture? So just to make sure, this is it. This is what we're talking about, a way to give more visibility to ethical culture. And I think, yes, that's my cue to stop sharing. Maybe not. Is that my cue? Oh, yeah, okay, fine. I hate technology so bad. All right, I'm done. Now, Muriel's going to talk for a while about questions and thoughts that she has. And let's be sure we spotlight Muriel so that people can see her. And
Oh, I'm spotlighted.
oh, you are? Okay, that's
Oh,
me.
yes.
All righty, thank you. Oh, I see. Okay, it's me and technology. That's what it is. Now I'm with you. And Jan is going to be taking notes for us, and I'm going to be quiet.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. I just would like to say a couple of words before I sort of start. First, I'd like to thank you for coming to this workshop today, because in point of fact, this could be the beginning of a new tomorrow for the Ethical Action Committee at the national and at the local level. And we hope that we provide some stimulation for those two trajectories. So I want to thank you for coming. The next thing I want to say to you is, by virtue of the fact that you are here, it would seem that you have some things on your mind and that you are interested in finding out how the ethical culture community can respond to it. And in the course of the next few minutes, I'm going to be asking you how are you responding to it? Or how would you like to respond to it based on your current set of circumstances? So now I'm going to start with a really broad question. Why are you here? And I would like not just to say, don't give me the perfunctory kind of answers like, well, I want to hear what you have to say. Really, what was your motivating factor? And if everybody doesn't want to respond, that's fine. But I would certainly encourage several people to come forward and tell us what's on your mind when you hear the word ethical action committee, and what are your hopes? What are your dreams with regard to that process, or what will become a process? Anybody? Am I getting the silent treatment? Is that what's going
No.
on?
But Nick's got his
Okay.
hand up.
I can't hear someone.
Nick Sanders.
Nick Sanders has his hand up.
Okay, Nick, go right ahead.
Hi,
Hi.
thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I've been at the Philadelphia Ethical Society. I've been a couple of times chairing the Ethical Action Committee, and we've done different things at different times. At first, I think it was that we were trying to satisfy the interests of people who came into the Ethical Society because they were interested in ethical action. That is, they had projects that they worked on. And we were sort of being pulled around all kinds of areas. So I focused in a particular area, but we were very much directed outside to decision makers, policy makers that way, in that we would kind of get somebody who was interested in something. They may have had a contact, and then we would go to that contact. Since then, my second round as chair of the Ethical Action Committee, that's much more recent. We're a member of an interfaith coalition called POWER. It's Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild. There are about 50 congregations. It's African American led, which was one of our interests that we wanted to experience, to learn in that setting. So, and it's involved us. We have different campaigns. I've been involved in the education campaign, and we've worked with policymakers at the state level in terms of state funding for public education. So we have that. That's been going for probably 5 years now, not just education, but criminal justice, economic dignity, climate justice. Those are different campaigns that this group works on. And in that setting, I'm happy to report that we do provide what are called reflections, along with others who give prayers and so forth at these events. And in the reflections, we present things that are basically ethical culture oriented, humanist orientation. And we've had an influence there, I think, on these other activists who are working in this interfaith coalition. In a week, I'm going to have a program on Sunday where I'm presenting something about working with other organizations. And I'm trying to get people to step forward to talk about things they do outside the ethical society that might be connected. So that's I think the reason I'm here by a long shot here with this background is that I really would like for in the next week to be doing some good things, and I hope this meeting will help me do that in our Sunday platform. I've asked for other people to be involved to present things. We've gotten 4 or 5 people who are willing to be interviewed about what they're doing outside. So I'll be asking, the kind of questions that maybe come up here or generated from what we discuss here. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. That was very elaborate, and I do thank you for that information. It sounds like in many cases you are much further along than some some people in other places. Other comments? I see your hand up somewhere.
Could I just interject, Tom, before we do that? And I apologize, Muriel. Jan reminded me that I made a mistake and forgot to cue her to drop the link into chat for the notes page, so that if people want to go, if they don't get a chance to speak and they want to write their comments or answers to the questions on that page, there it is right now. You can go right ahead and do it there, or put your comments in the chat. I apologize, Muriel. I just
Oh, absolutely, no problem. Anybody else? Do we have comments on this
Ira?
question? Yes.
Tom.
Yeah. Hi. Okay, so besides listening to two of my favorite people here, I hope that other societies are going to get a chance to hear about our very successful Lucy's Children anti-racism program, and also our Issues in Action program hosted by Bert Hurwitz, who joined us today. And then I'm also hoping that correspondingly, we can find out about climate change ethical action programs that other societies might have that we might be able to adopt in Brooklyn.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Lujira has her hand up.
Don't I always? Ethical action, it means to me, it means taking some action. And well, I think one of the things that bothers me sometimes is, and I saw a change with the Roe v. Wade decision, and the AAU put up a statement. And the reason I use that is because I'm a writer and I'm always posting stuff.
Okay.
And my form of ethical action is writing and say, the AEU said this. You know, it gives it more cachet, and we may bring more people in. So I guess my thing is just seeing us take more stances on things that are troublesome to the populace. That's it.
I think your response, Lujira, is in the direction that I'd like to take us at this juncture, and that is, what are the means and what are the concerns that people have, and how much visibility are people willing to put basically shoulders to the grindstone to get out? There's a question about being a small fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond. Those of us who live in large cities like New York, it doesn't take too much to actually have a rippling effect. And there are other people who are in other parts of the country where that's not so obvious and that's not so automatic. So I was curious to ask you, for those of you who have not engaged in ethical action at all, I should say action as opposed to ethical action, because ethical action suggests that there is a review process. That means that you're operating within a prescribed behavioral patterns, but the action has to exist, period. So my question, are there some of you out there who have not started or have not initiated something that has to deal with a public issue? And if so, I'd like you to come forward at this point. Is there a hesitation in your society to do so? Some people feel that the society should not be engaged in public communication on issues, and that in some societies actually is a point of discussion. Anybody? Okay, please don't let this be like my college students, you know, where the professor comes in and says, all right, is everybody prepared? And everybody sort of slouches down in the chair and hopes they don't get called on.
Muriel
Okay.
Charles has his hand up.
Muriel and Carolyn, thank you for being here and for doing this, facilitating this meet. Appreciate you guys both personally and otherwise. I think, well, I had my hand up during when you posed the question about why are we here. I'll mention that momentarily. I think for me, when I think about ethical action for American Ethical Union or for our societies across the nation, I think about our position and what we stand for. If we have a mission statement or if we stand for something and we are not bringing or making a comment about it, whether it's the war, Roe v. Wade, the January 6th situation, I think for me, I think about it from, depending on what the issue is, I think about it from an ethical point of view. I think about it from an action point of view. And I must say that a part of why I've been at Brooklyn for such a long time is because my volunteer work was before I became a member with Ethical Action. That was with Charlie Horowitz. As Lajara mentioned, being a writer, when you make a statement or endorse or not endorse something, for me, I think about it along those lines, along the lines of, is this ethical, or is this ethical, XYZ happened and ethical culture has not commented or don't have a position on. I don't think we should answer every beck and call. I'm not saying that. It's just that there are some issues that we need to speak to. If it's the Ukraine, we need to speak to that. If it's Roe versus Wade, we need to speak to that. And I think, I did read of our position on that. If I'm not mistaken, it could have been Bart. And that's what we do. That's what we do. That's part of being an activist, activism.
Okay, there are various forms of action. We've got the writing, we've got issuing public statements. Anybody speaking to any other form of action?
Jeff has his hand up.
I'm actually very curious about what actions has the AEU taken in the past and how effective we've been. Because my understanding is that there are certain areas that the AEU is not allowed or not considered important enough to, it's like interference in some of the political issues. So I'm just curious to find out what has been effective and where should we be going. And I'm of course very curious about Lucy's Children. I know very little about it and I want to find out what's going on there.
Well, very good. Let me say that when I turn the mic over to Carolyn, she can answer historically about the Ethical Action Committee at the national level. I will tell you that in terms of our organization, we have in the Brooklyn Society, we have merged both Lucy's Children and the Ethical Action Committee together for some practical reasons, which I will not venture into at the moment, but I will say that I have issued in the name of ethical action about 15 public statements on public issues, including Roe v. Wade, including immigration, including Haiti, so forth and so on. So I'm going to say that while now we're in New York and we've had a couple of rather positive responses. There was a teacher who was being red baited in our neighborhood for some work that she was doing. And that's sort of a typical way of people getting shut down. We spoke up on her behalf. When we were doing some work on Juneteenth, this was early on before most people didn't even know Juneteenth existed. We wrote to the governor and asked him to please consider making this a state holiday. And in about 3 days, I would like to think that he was overwhelmed by our letter, but I know that's not the case. A number of people were probably on his case about this, but within about 3 days of the receipt of our letter, he had made it a national holiday. And as you know now, a state holiday, and now we're in the national holiday. So where we have ventured, which has not been a lot, we have done some things and we have been supportive. My concern is if you're asking for action, is it going to be a one-stop or is it going to be a sustained activity? Are you looking to just simply give your opinion and then walk away? Or are you looking to make a change in the relationship that is offensive to you for whatever that set of reasons are? That's something you have to weigh. I'm not expecting you to give me a glib answer at this point, but I will say that everything doesn't lend itself to simply making an opinion. Then the other part of that is whether or not ethical action has sufficient means by getting its opinion actually out in the general public, or are we talking to ourselves? That's the other part of it. One of my concerns has been, are we talking to people who have a contrary view? Because we don't need to win ourselves over. We're already on one side of the fence versus the other side. Are we having conversations that engage other people who have differences of opinion to bring them across to our way of thinking, or to at least agree to disagree in a civil way? That's been and that's an ongoing movement-based kind of concern, because we're not going to all be joined at the hips. I see Jeffrey's name up. Is Jeffrey wanting to say something?
Yes, I would like to address what I see as a threshold question for not-for-profits with a tax exemption. As an attorney who's represented not-for-profits, a lot of there's always a question in terms of what is prohibited activity. And we've discussed this in Westchester. And what is absolutely prohibited is political activity, endorsement. But what is not totally limited is lobbying. And the test is a 20% of resources, staff or money. So a voluntary effort is an interesting issue because you're not spending any recognized resource on it. Should your decision be that you want to do more than 20% lobbying, one of the strategies is to form a 501c4, which does not have that limitation. And I think that might be something that AU might want to consider. A lot of the action-oriented not-for-profits have that. It still has a tax exemption connected to it, but it allows for broader activity. And the other issue that I like to consider is people talk about a place at the table. And I think we're coming into a period where there's going to be intensified division and regionalism. And more and more, the table we want to be at will be a local table or a state table. And I think we've got to be strategizing there that to some extent we are beyond the era of persuasion. And it's going to be a contention for power and control of institutions of social influence. So I think that we can speak historically, but we're entering into a period where our methods have got to be more calculated and quite certainly, I think, more engaging in some level of risk.
Thank you.
Well, let me say this to you. There is conversation on the 501c4. There's also conversation on whether or not a for-profit arm ought to be developed. I don't know whether you have a history of the nonprofit organizations, but 45 or 50 years ago, corporations did not have a nonprofit arm, but they have discovered that it is a tool of convenience, not to mention a tool of influence. But the nonprofits have not looked on the other side of the fence to say, well, what for-profit arrangements can we make that will also facilitate our getting out into the general public? Part of our problem, however, is with regard to systemic response We can develop a statement. Where does it go? To whom does it go? Do we do follow-up with regard to that? How many of you have done work with directly working with a legislator? And I would say there's a limitation. We can do almost every part of the political spectrum except supporting a particular candidate. So those people who feel that we ought not do that are a little apprehensive and making a much more narrow field of what is possible for our operations. I've worked with nonprofits all my life, and we've done everything from sitting in to demonstrations to writing letters to meeting people at dinner parties and the whole 9 yards. So I don't want you to be so apprehensive as to say that you cannot impact political people or people who are in policy positions. I see Vondra's hands.
Thank you, Muriel and Carolyn. I guess what I'm interested in from this at the AEU level and the Ethical Action Committee at the AEU level is to really find some interesting voices within our membership that can take the megaphone and can go into various situations. So we, as far as Ethical Action of Brooklyn is concerned, is that we really have benefited in the last 2 or 3 years because of Muriel's voice. Muriel has a great speaking voice. She is on target. She says things beautifully directly. She is a great spokesperson. So how can we use Muriel at a national level? Because we don't, Muriel is lost really at a local level, in my opinion, because she can actually speak much more broadly and much more powerfully to national issues. So that's what I'd sort of like to underscore at this point. And I'm sure there are other among us, and I don't know everybody, but there are people that have similarly a good speaking and are similarly well-grounded in their issues that they could be speaking to a national audience.
Well, thank you, Vondra. I really do appreciate your level of confidence in my capabilities. Let me just say this. We can only lay a little of the groundwork here. There will be succeeding gatherings, and hopefully, if you are interested, people will write their contact information down so that when we're able to put it together, we know who to call on. I will say this to you. Our people have to be willing to do sustained activities. You know, what happens with a good idea, they say in the Army, never volunteer, okay. Because you got the idea, you've got the execution, you've got to go out and get the people, you have to write it, you have to prove it, you have to go through, you know the story, what I'm trying to say. We need a team approach, which is not what we have at this point. So let's just say that the formation of an operation to get our voice out and beyond our own membership level, that is including our membership level, but out and beyond our membership level, is a very specific goal for the EAC committee for 22-23. Does that make sense to you? Can I get a amen or shake of the hand or?
I say, amen.
Okay, great.
Let me
Okay,
tell you,
now
this is a really good time for Jan to drop the form in the chat. The link for the sign up form is there, and we're going to refer to it again if we don't get too excited. But after that speech, Muriel, I think now is the time to strike to invite people to sign up if they're interested in doing, at least learning more. We talk about the doing while we're learning, but if there's more need for learning, there's that link. So we're asking them to sign up, Muriel.
I think that's apropos. That's really fine. Let me also say that there's nobody in this gathering, at least that I have first-hand knowledge of, who would not also be adequately possible as spokespeople. It's just a matter of training and experience. And everybody needs to get out there and make their feelings known, because if we're going to have an impact with regard to ethical anything, now is actually the time. Our democracy is hanging by a few threads with some people who are just tenacious enough not to let it go. But there are other people who would be very eager to cut the threads. Oh, let's skip over this part. We don't need this part. We don't need these people and all this other excuse mania, so that they can operate as they want to. That is not government. That's reactive engagement. And that will take us to the clave days very quickly. And I don't think any one of us wants to go in that direction, even if we don't care for each other, which is all right. It's all right that we don't love each other. But what is not all right is that we're not civil to each other, that we're not respectful, that we don't honor each other as a way of functioning moving forward. So what do we expect our kids? I mean, there's a lot for us to discuss, but I'm almost out of time. I want to say thank you for this segment. I have loved working with Carolyn. She's a wonderful, wonderful leader. And I am looking forward to us continuing this discussion at another point in time. So Carolyn, I am getting ready to turn this over to you. I think I'm actually on time.
Yes, you are, dear, and it was lovely and very inspiring, and very much in terms of um, 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 what we want to say next. If I can get this, I'm so bad at sharing. Hold the fort. I got to figure out what I'm sharing. I don't want to share the game I'm playing. That would be so unhappy. There we are. Okay. I do have a couple of things I want to talk about. And I told Muriel there were just one or two things I desperately wanted to say in this workshop, because it's really the first chance I've had to really get down to the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of how you do the kind of activism that I think we really need to be doing. We can't do everything we want to do. We can't do it all. We don't have enough hands. We don't have enough hours in the day. But we can get started, and we can certainly do it from what I would say is definitely a moral high ground. You say, what do we work on? What do we know? What does ethical culture even stand for that we should be out there representing? Muriel gave us an absolutely perfect statement when she said, we don't have to like each other, we just have to respect each other. What does ethical culture stand for but respect for the worth of every human being? We're going to have different viewpoints, we're going to have different attitudes about things, but we not only can believe that, we can model it, we can teach it in the interactions that we have with people who are not like-minded, but probably could be like-hearted if we just gave them a chance. So what I'm going to suggest for just a moment is a chance to think about your issues. This is a sort of practical session, and it's not going to go very far because we don't have a lot of time. But when you say, what are our issues? What do we stand for? Read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Is that just really a lot of what we talk about in ethical culture? Also, look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. They are right in line with the things that we stand for and the things that we want to do. And I bring them up because they are references that you can use as your high ground to talk about why we stand for what we do. We don't have to oppose. We sometimes don't want to tell really heart-wrenching stories, although those are very effective in getting our point across. But people don't always like to hear facts and figures that persuade us. We just have to learn how to tell the story so they can hear, and this becomes a piece of it. I also referenced here the resolution that we passed in 2021 as our recommitment to the culture of peace. The AEU has stood for peace for many, many, many years. And these are heart and soul, if you will, of what we stand for. When you pick your issue, one of the things that you hear all the time is think globally and act locally. If you think about global issues, you know that they manifest at our national level. Climate change is something that concerns the whole planet, but problems related to climate change are being driven, policies related to making negative impacts on the climate are being driven at our national level. If you wanted to affect some of the global things, you would say, maybe I need to work through my Congress. Maybe I need to work through our national government. Look at it again and reconsider thinking nationally and acting locally, if you will. The same things that are happening globally, manifesting themselves nationally, also show up at your local level. The same problems of emissions for climate action, their climate concerns, the same elements of inequality, the restrictions on education, the assault on democracy, it's happening at the county level as well as the city level. So where we think we're a small group, we're small groups of people scattered about the country, where we might have the biggest effect for the smallest amount of effort, honestly, is to act on the local things. And I just made this little picture. I'm not very good with graphics, but it's to say, I mean, if you're working locally, you are working nationally and you are working globally if you do a piece of that. So I want to say we titled this workshop, and we're just really giving passing reference to it, but I feel obligated if we named it for making contact with policymakers, we ought to talk about it a little bit. So here we are. If you think locally and act locally in this sense, what is your issue? What matters to you? What are you passionate about? Sometimes your society might not be very active in ethical action, might not have broader programs. Sometimes you go from one thing to the next. There's issues all the time. Maybe if you could find an issue that you really care about passionately, that's the issue that you're going to give time to and energy, because none of these things happen overnight. None of these things are solved overnight. So think about, what is the issue that matters so very much to me, and how does it manifest in my local community or my state? I picked trans rights for the moment simply because Texas is a horror story for trans children. They're now actually calling it child abuse for parents to seek gender affirming care, health care for their children. And they're actively pursuing parents and separating them from their children. Lots of news, lots of lawsuits, but it's also an issue that some of us care about very deeply, and it matters. So this issue, or what issue is important to you? How does it manifest locally? What do you want to happen locally? Uriel said to me when we were talking about this, Carolyn, you got to have a plan. You always have to have a plan before you actually start going out and doing stuff. So this is part of that planning, part of the process. What do you want to have? And just as a footnote, remember our tendency to go all or nothing on something. I want this total change. Sometimes progress has to come in steps, and sometimes all or nothing means nothing. So decide what you want to do. And I forgot to put this on a slideshow, didn't I? So my exciting graphic did not happen because look, when I ask who decides or what decides the outcome, what you're looking at, see, I did that, is a pressure point. You're looking for the point that you can press. Where can you make the difference? Okay? People are protesting outside the homes of Supreme Court justices, whether you think that's right or wrong. That ain't the pressure point anymore. They've already made their decision on Roe v. Wade. The pressure point is somewhere else in the state legislators, maybe in your county government, where the DA is going to say, I'm not going to prosecute people for helping a woman get an abortion. But finding out where is an effective way to make a difference is a piece of what you're needing to do. I might say then, if you know who makes the decision, you might want to try to find out who can if you can't, can you personally influence the decider? Do you have a relationship already with the person who's going to make the decision? Your representative, your senator, your city council member, whatever level the decision is being made, can you influence them? That's a pressure point. Do you know, if you don't know them personally, do you know somebody who can influence them? Could you, like, are you on a committee, civic committee, with the wife or the pastor of this decider? And my big point here is who you can get to know. Who can you get to know who can affect the decider? When we talk about getting a job these days, we say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, really, when you're trying to effect change, it's very often who can you get to know? Who can make the decision? What would it take to influence them? And what can you begin to do to make a difference in all of this? I see hands going up. Let me see what I've got next here. Okay, I want to talk about retail next, but I'm going to stop and see what the questions are. Vondra, you have a question. You're muted.
Or maybe a
Actually,
comment. Mhm.
I'm sorry, more like a comment, really. Carolyn, the other part that I think is important is for us to know who our affiliates are, our organizational affiliates, and that it behooves us to, like, really not be apart from all of the other organizing that's going on. So, of course, in Brooklyn, we have dozens of different organizations. So I feel that it's really important for Brooklyn ethical people to, like, make friends with 350.org, make friends with Brooklyn for Peace, and really get close to our affiliate organizations and make friends and be supportive of, and bring them into our umbrella and get under theirs.
That's kind of a good point, but it's I think we're going to address that on the next slide when I talk about the difference between wholesale and retail. So I think it's relevant there. Jeffrey, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, I just want to speak up in support of the Universal Declaration of Human
Yeah.
Rights.
Mhm.
When we were protesting the Vietnam War, we did not want to surrender patriotism or the flag. We now don't want to surrender law and order. So concern for law and order is what law, what order. The Universal Declaration gives us a groundbreaking reference for the values that we adhere to. On the relationship with our public officials, I would suggest that people get to know who the constituency service peoples are and who the issue people are in the offices. You won't always get FaceTime with a representative, but you can always contact a constituent service or an issue person in an office. And as far as we can, have it not be representational in terms of one person, but have a delegation that goes and speaks.
Yeah, very good.
I-
Thank you.
May I,
Exactly
is
right.
it possible for me to jump in here for a
Yes,
hot minute?
ma'am.
Okay, one of the things I want to say is the first thing is to isolate what the issue is. The second thing is to become knowledgeable of the issue, because you will be challenged. You will be challenged by the people you're trying to influence and people who are, for whatever the reason, sick and tired of your belly aching about this particular issue. It could be your husband, it could be your wife, and you need to have an intelligent response, because just blowing up and saying it should be obvious doesn't really get us from one point to the next point. Then the other thing too, it's called strategic development. Where and who and how? These are all questions that are segments of developing a plan of action. You people know me, and I'm always saying, well, what is the outcome? What are you looking for? What are you expecting? Now, some people are expecting a 180-degree turn. I'm not. I'm just trying to get the dial to move a few inches. Yeah, I figure if it gets to move, I can throw my shoulder to the wheel and get it to move a few inches. Somebody else can throw their shoulder to the wheel and move it a few inches more. But I am not in this world by myself, which is one of the reasons why I try to be very, what's the word, open to people, even the people who give me grief, because it's not my world. It's a world that I am in a shared relationship with. Um, I think we have to pay attention to our feeder roots, our young people. I look around at our various societies. I'm looking for 20-year-olds. I'm looking for 16-year-olds. I want to know, where are they? And people say, well, you're not really doing anything. That is not entirely the case. Okay, what is part of the case is that our flow of communication tends to be to people that we like and people that we know. We don't go out and talk to people who are on the other side of whatever it is. When we were putting together early on, putting together the civil rights movement, I will tell you, now I wasn't there in the 40s or the 50s, I'm not that old, but I am getting up the pike. I remember in my church, and I was raised in the Lutheran church, we don't go there. Then we got to the announcement section. This little girl stood up. She couldn't have been more than about 4'3". And I had never seen her before in my life. She stood up in the church and she said, we are having a revolution. Her name, I don't remember, well, I could remember her name, but at the moment it's slipping my mind. That's what happens when you get up the pike. And she said, the revolution is to get Black people to register to vote. That is the point. Who are we or where are we? Though we don't have a lot of money, but we have motive, we have interest, and we have energy. Well, you know, you can't beat that. You can't even pay for that, okay? And when church was over, et cetera, and down the line, and some of you read a little bit of my biography, I was in a meeting, her name was Joni Trumpower. And she was a little white girl in my little Black church. And she was standing up talking about a revolution, and she was going to try to get Black people to register to vote. Well, I will tell you, if Superman had landed in the middle of the congregation, it couldn't have made a bigger impact. People were talking to each other. What in the world? Revolution, et cetera. Because revolution is always associated with armed responses. People have such a narrow understanding of things. I work very hard in Lucy's Children and trying to expand our thinking, expand our vocabulary and our knowledge, because really you can't truncate this stuff, you know. Anyway, I went to another meeting, and who was there but the same girl who had stood up in the congregation? I didn't even know I was going to meet her again. And I've been hooked ever since. How was I hooked? Because the ideas that she was floating was something I could adhere to. Now, is everybody prepared to adhere to it? No. I can tell you about the year of no talking in my family. Is everybody trying to figure out, well, what the heck is Muriel doing now? I mean, I decided I wasn't going to press my hair. I had decided I was going to wear my clothes a certain way. I was hanging out with some people that one of my neighbors called the communists down the street. Now, he wouldn't know the communists if they showed up with a sign said, I am a communist. He wouldn't have recognized it. But nonetheless, because they were doing something that was off track as far as he was concerned, he was not even prepared to look at this stuff. When I tried to get him to let us store food and clothing for LaFleur County, Mississippi, he told me, no, I couldn't. You can't put that stuff in there. I'm not going to deal with those communists. Well, you know what I did? I started, now, if you know Washington, D.C., you know 16th Street was the big dividing line. Rich white people on one side and poor Black people on the other. I started at the lower end of 16th Street, and I knocked on every door of something that looked like it had some money. It had a good door. That was my criteria for having some money. And I went and I ended up at the Unitarian Church on 16th Street with the same story. I have a truckload of things for LaFleur County. Most people didn't even know what LaFleur County was. The priest said, bring it on in. I'll let you have the basement. And I brought it on in. Now I'm gonna tell you another part of the story which never gets told. Everybody was going to help. Guess who was doing the help? You're looking at her. There you go. The entire help was who? Muriel. People would come and drop stuff, but they would not carry it through. Well, that's all right, because you know me, I'm a turtle. I'm going to keep on going. By the time I had, about 6 months later, I had what I projected was it was too many things for the basement. It was as simple as that. So then the next thing I turned around and I asked people, well, how's it going to get to Mississippi? No, everybody was clueless. I said, okay, fine. So I started down at Union Station. If you know Washington, D.C., you know, down by Union Station, you got a lot of important buildings, etc. And I ended up with the Teamsters. Now, the Teamsters were in a lot of trouble because they had problems with my friends in New Jersey, and they had a whole lot of other trouble. Anyway, I showed up in their office. I couldn't have been more than about 17, but I always had a lot of mouth. So I was at the door, and the secretary was trying to get me to go out the door because she had never even heard of LaFleur County. I was disrupting her day, etc. Well, I got loud, and behind me, a door opened, and a man said to me, "I have been listening to you. Come here, talk to me. I want to know what you're talking about." So I went in there and explained to him that the voting effort in Mississippi had gotten to a crucial point, and that the Black people in these various counties were now cut off from welfare. And if you know anything about Mississippi and you know anything about the Delta, that is the poorest area in the country. It could stand up against any other poor area and win the day. You know what he said to me? He said, "What do you need?" Now I'm going to make this public. He said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need a truck." He said, "What else do you need?" I said, "I need an armed truck." I said, because the state troopers in Mississippi have been confiscating things that have been shipped to Mississippi, and I need some help. I said, "I'm not asking you to have a shootout on top of some gifts that people have given, but I need you to be aware that this is a hostile situation." The man said, "Give me the date and time." I have loved the Teamsters ever since. I looked up one day and here come two guys. You would never have put that together, that they were willing to take the truck. They came. I'm not going to give any further description. I have talked enough. My things went to Mississippi, and I have loved the Teamsters with.
Uh-oh. You hit the mute button. Where'd you go?
Come back, Muriel.
Oh, Muriel.
So I'm telling you, if you've got the will, there's a way, but you got to put the energy to it, because a lot of times you are the only one to see it through. Now we have a project at Lucy's Children on Haiti. Well, people say, well, we got people here in the United States that are starving on Haiti. That is very true. And no one is giving an argument to that. Okay. But I am working on a project that has to do with Haiti. My question is, are you with me? If you want to do a project that has something to do with people starving in the United States, I am with you. Okay. Do we understand each other?
Yeah.
But you got to put some energy to it and not just give me a counter argument, because there's need all over this world. There's need all over this city. The question is, what are you prepared to do to make a difference? I finished preaching. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Amen.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. I thank you so much.
I just had a quick, I'm not going to.
Okay, Lujara, you've had your hand up.
Yes, first of all, when I was listening to Carolyn, and I've been saying this recently about anything that comes up, everything is social justice. And we forget this because they involve people, climate change, justice, and the question becomes, because of the things that we might see coming down the pike, like we've already overturned Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. Now the next things is Obergefell and some other stuff. And the question becomes, how do you attack? What I can do is to try to get people to understand what might happen. Yeah. And one of the ways I've been doing that is, as Muriel knows, my favorite book is my favorite two books are The Handmaid's Tale, mm-hmm. and It Can't Happen Here.
Yeah.
And I really tell people, go back and look at It Can't Happen Here, because or if somebody sends me their email, I'll just send you the 15 points that came out of that book. Yeah. But the trouble is that even just trying to get people to understand that there's a great possibility of this stuff happening.
Oh, we froze.
And you look at the UN's charter, and you look at those resolutions that have been passed for them by the United Nations, and then you start looking at the ones that aren't signed by the United States. So these are just a bunch of things that you put together to try to figure out, or I'm working on trying to figure out what am I attacking next. So how am I going to preach? I'll go to Muriel's thing. What am I going to preach next? One other thing, and I've been saying this, and I'm going to bring it up because I think it's really important. What is our mission and vision statement? Because we may have had one for the Ethical Union for a number of years, and I know we've had one for Brooklyn for a number of years, but visions and missions change. What is our mission as of a vision as of now?
Yeah.
And that's something I think that we need to think about how, because if everything's social justice and we're supposed to be supposedly ethical, then the goal would be to try to fit our vision to being a social, responsive organization. And I'm stopped preaching.
I hear you, and I think those discussions are going to happen, Lujara. Let me go, not to slow down anything, but let me see if I can find where I was just a minute ago and give you a couple of other ideas and points there. I wanted to make a distinction for, and I think Vandra has made this point or has raised this point. One of the things that we often talk about are the large issues that are affecting so many people so broadly across the country. How can we have an effect? And as a small organization with not a lot of resources and not a lot of people, sometimes we have to do something sort of 101 or in small groups. So I wanted to just simply mention this to you. And I'll tell you, I'm talking out of Chris Matthews' book, Hardball. I don't like Chris Matthews particularly in his style, but the first time I ever read Hardball, I said, well, yeah, that's how we do it in Texas. And sure enough, he was talking about LBJ and the LBJ treatment and how you deal with people, and that retail notion of a one-on-one relationship. If you're wanting to find the decider, like Muriel found the decider for her place to put the supplies she was collecting, she found the decider who was going to transport the goods to Mississippi. In the same case, who's going to be the decider for whatever your issue turns out to be? And I'm suggesting that you want to get to know that person, that you want to know what their issues are, what matters to them, what motivates them to do what they are. Because if you can make a connection to the person you're trying to convince, you may disagree on a lot of issues. But if you can find where the connection is, sometimes that's an opportunity to persuade. That's an opportunity to say, look, we have common ground here. We're not trying to challenge what it is that you want, but we're trying to move towards something that we both agree with. And even if you disagree and you don't have the best outcome that at that point, still, this person is the decider. So maybe it's a good idea to build a relationship, to, if you can get a relationship, maintain it over time. Now, I want to tell you the reason that I'm saying this about building relationships over time, and this comes from a hard-won experience. The one thing I want to say, when you're looking to talk to people, to try to convince them about your point of view, what you want to do, it's very easy to dismiss the person who's at the counter, who's the receptionist at the office. It's very easy to dismiss the intern who's probably going to be elected to office in another 10 or 15 years, or the person who's manning the office turns out to be the chief of staff who's just there temporarily. Do not think you are hot stuff when you walk into somebody's office and these are minions to whom you must speak. That may be the decider. So you want to be careful. You not only want to talk to you, if you may never get in to meet with your representative, and you'll only be able to talk to the staff, treat them like they are your best friend, because they will have a large influence. And the reason you don't want to make enemies on purpose is because today's opponent can be tomorrow's ally. My experience is I really don't have time to tell the story, but maybe we'll find another time to talk about it. But the you well, my daddy always said, Carolyn, you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. He used to say it a lot, which made me wonder why he kept emphasizing it so much. Perhaps there was a problem that he needed to address. But in any case, it's the same kind of thing. You can be courteous, you can be respectful, you can be kind, you can be ethical in how you approach people and start building the relationship. I have been in a public hearing testifying, asking Texas senators for money or for people that they thought were queers and junkies and saying, please give me $23 million for medications. And whatever would happen in the hearing, I've come out of there and had a legislator come to me and say, that was really a fine thing to say. That really made sense. I think he voted against me, but we still had the door open. And I'll tell you that a few weeks later, I went back on another issue and he was my ally. So it works to be what we're hoping to be, is ethical. One last thing I've got to say, so we can go back to this discussion, because I know Muriel's got more stories to tell, is that you should never give up. I want to introduce you to a book. I haven't finished reading it, but it's Bill Moyer. I didn't type that wrong. It's not the PBS Moyers, but Bill Moyer, who wrote a book called Doing Democracy. And this is a very, very blurry screenshot of what he calls the movement action plan. And here is where we are on the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade, where activists on the issue might feel that they have failed. But he's saying that this is a moment of public victory, that in fact public awareness, public opposition to power holder policies, and public support for activist positions is increasing. This is a time not to give up on the issue. Do not give up, but carry on. And I think we're there with a lot of things. We have some people in power who are trying to overthrow democracy, who are trying to roll back the clock. But a lot of Americans don't want it if we just don't give up. I'm stopping my share. And those were things I urgently needed to say, want to say more. If you saw the link in chat that Jan put there for us of the sign up for possibly more discussions of more discussions. I think we could do more training. We could provide more. Well, Muriel certainly got more stories to tell, and I do too, but there's also that experience to share. And many of you also have experience if we come together to talk about particular issues. So fill out that form if you're interested in carrying on. And Muriel, what are we supposed to do next?
Well, the main thing is a decision on the part of the people who are participating now is whether or not we're going to see them again. So that's what the form is critical, because otherwise this is a one shot. I'm going to go back to Lucy's Children. When we started Lucy's Children, people said, well, what in the world is all of that? Well, Lucy's Children is basically giving homage to what we will call the mother of us all, who fell out of a tree approximately 3.4 million years ago over there in the Afar region of Ethiopia. Now, some people are going to say, well, I didn't fall out of a tree and those are not my ancestors. Well, okay, I'm going to put you on hold. And I'm just going to say that for the rest of us, we will move forward with the evolution of human beings. Mm-hmm. We're working with a knowledge that is led by science. Is science always right? No. But one of the things that I do like about the scientists, they're always trying to get it right. All right. Unlike other places and other people. You cannot beat education. One of the reasons that we are having some of the problems that we're having now, this is the product of segregated education. A lot of the people that we're talking to, or would like to talk to rather, who have these really obstinate positions based on nothing. It's almost flooring that they didn't think they needed to look at some alternative information. that they think that something coming out of somebody's mouth who is a consistent lawyer, that they should take that as the truth. I mean, we have a gap here, an intellectual gap. And so one of the things that we push in Lucy's Children is knowledge. We push it all the time. Now, everybody doesn't want to do it. That's okay. But I'll tell you that in the almost 7 years of our operation, people have moved light years from where they were to where they can hold a conversation if they choose with almost anybody about a variety of sources. All of our stuff is not about just Black people. And I wanted to throw this in because some people don't understand this. The movement that I was a part of did not just spend its time talking about Black people and voting, although that was a central piece. We had Black lung disease people from West Virginia. Now you can't get any more, let's say, sort of segregation minded than Black lung folks from West Virginia. And I'm making a really general statement. But the point of the matter is that we shared space with them. They came to us and said they needed space. They wanted to be near where they could go and lobby, and they were also unsuccessful in that because Black lung continues to be a problem that stokes our coal mining area. We said sure. So they had a table on one side, we had a table on the other side. Where do you think the issues came forward with regard to people with special needs? Because we had people with special needs. We said, well, go ahead and develop an arm to address this, you know. And some of our people were at the first White House conference were people with special needs. You see something that needs to be done, do it. Don't wait for other people. Now you try to convince other people to come along with you, but if you're going to wait for the world to say it's okay, you will never get it done. All the people that we consider heroes, all the people that we consider leaders are people who moved on it anyway, because it's something that has to be done. That's the ethical motivation, that it has to be done. You see someone that's hungry, you're so moved, feed them, okay? If you see a child that's supposed to be in school and during the work day or school day and they're out there playing basketball, stop and ask a question. Let people know that you're interested in their lives. Now, some people may say, well, mind your business, and give you a whole lot of to do. But I promise you that there will be people. I'll give you an example. I go to this place. I used to go every day. Young white guy. He didn't know me for anything. And I passed by him going into this lovely place that I call my garden. And he was smoking a cigarette. I said to him, you should put that cigarette out. And he kind of looked at me because, you know, I'm sure I'm not the first person who said that to him. And I said, you know why I want you to put that cigarette out? And he kind of looked at me. I said, because you are a good person and we don't want you to leave us early. I want you to hold on to your life, respect yourself, just stop cold turkey. I used to smoke too. Cold turkey. You know what that means? Stop. Every time I see him now, we wave like old friends. And I don't see him with a cigarette. And he's just smiling. And now when I go into the place, everybody's just waving at me, etc. I'm not trying to be his buddy. I'm trying to tell him I'm concerned about him as a human being. And we don't have to be buddies for me to say that to him. You know, my kids think that I'm a nosy old woman. Well, when you get to be my age, you can afford to be a nosy old woman. But the point that I'm trying to say, I would have done the same thing at 17. Okay. You know, one of our problems is that our youth are isolated. Their best friend is a computer or a telephone. You know, they don't know how to have a conversation. I've been studying these mass murders, these kids with these mass murders. They've got the worst social skills in the universe. They don't even know how to talk to people. And no wonder they're angry. They're furious. Who are they furious at? They're at people. Some of them are furious with their own home. But the point is, the matter is that we have a big failure factor. We have got to address that because we can't just allow this to just emerge in our society. We're not known for this. This is not democratic behavior. You know, this is caveman activity, you know? So, I mean, I finished. Let me not go further, but you understand my point. So we have a lot of things to attract and attack and clear up and mitigate. Thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. I just put a note in the chat to say we weren't missing the notes that Jan had taken. We want to come back to all of those items for discussion, but we only have about 10 minutes left. But we have a transcript and we have the video, and we've heard from you some very strong points about things you would like to see the AEU do about ethical action, information that you would like to have about how to do some of these. And I hope that some of you at least have had a chance to fill out the form that will allow us to contact you soon to let you know if we can come up with, it might be just a discussion group, no formal training session. And then again, I've got some old courses I used to teach on this subject, and we might have, a lobbying class. I didn't say the L word, but you know what's there. Anyway, we might be doing
Quick question.
Yes.
I got a message in the chat that there are some problems using the form. Are people having trouble advancing the form so they can submit it?
Great. Okay, sorry about that.
Well, has anyone successfully submitted a form?
Did anybody
I submitted it myself and it went through.
Okay, all right.
Me too.
I'll try to figure out what's going on there.
Thank you.
So sorry. Would you, yeah, this technology. Well, put your address in the chat and we'll get back to you. That'll do it. Just make sure. Just don't let us get away without seeing that. And we've got just about 5 minutes. What I want to say, is there anything anybody else wants to get into the discussion that they didn't get a chance to raise? Is there something that you want us to look at, follow up on, deal with, talk about? Anything? Rebecca, I see your hand up.
I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I tend to always be so. So there you go. This has been very helpful, and there's lots of good information, especially as I individually want to get out in the world and be more active and all of that. But relative to the Ethical Society of Austin and relative to the Ethical Society of Austin relative to AU, I'm having a really hard time understanding how we're going to. It feels to me like, as we've often talked, you and I and others in our society, it's a scattershot thing. We end up doing a lot. We have so many different things to focus on that we don't do them really well. And for a society that may have 10 people, if we're lucky, that are actively working for the society, some of us, the time we want to spend in volunteerism is spent on the society and keeping it going and doing its committees. And so the idea, so I'm going to finish with just this idea. I don't understand, and I understand I'm definitely in the minority here, but why we as a group or as our society has to talk about lobbying as a way to do this is beyond me. There are so many things that we can do that have nothing to do with lobbying or politics even. As Carolyn said, it's a horror show in Texas. Lots of it has to do with politics, but we could do so many things with never getting close to the line, never having to figure out whether we're spending 20%. Why the hell do we keep thinking we need to add that one more layer on when, at least for our society, it's just something that, sure, we could do it, but we can't do it all. So anyway, there's my.
If I can hop in here, I would like to say that lobbying is just one avenue. There are many avenues. The critical issue is how many people are going to stay the course, and that you can come up with some kind of unified understanding of what you consider success. Because some people are not going to stay with it. I've been working on voting rights for 50 years. There are not a whole lot of people willing to do that. Okay, some people will only work with it for 5 days. Some people will work with it for a week. You have to know your own base, and your base will tell you what they are willing to accept and what they're not willing to accept. Now, my base, Lucy's Children, there are a lot of, I get them to come to meetings, And occasionally I get people to come forward and do some of the participatory aspects. But you know what? I made a decision that Lucy's Children was going to continue, whether it was a committee of one or a committee of 1,000. And so I do it. So they know that the first 3 Fridays of every month, there is Muriel and they are welcome to come. Somebody's got to anchor, somebody's got to count to what I call champ. Some people use the word champion. I'm saying anchor because there's a lot of gut work that has to be done. People think you have a presentation, all you got to do is sort of draw up a presentation. No, you got to research it. You got to know what you're talking about. You can't stand up there and sound like an idiot, I mean, you also have to ameliorate the situation so that it's understandable, okay? That people can grasp it, that they walk away with something. And then you have to follow up. All of this stuff is the admin part of organization. This is not the photo op part. This is the guts, okay? And it takes a lot of work. Commit yourself to it. Take the piece of it that you can handle and do it. Don't worry about the rest of it. Don't even think about it. Okay? That's my suggestion to you.
Rebecca, let me just respond also. Your comment is exactly on point and very apt and correct for Austin. There's a special sense there, concerns there about having extra, well, no, I'm not phrasing this right. The history of lobbying in that society. And I don't think that that's really probably going to be a choice for Austin. Austin has to decide what can it do. And all of us have to decide. Everybody has to say, my society has this many people willing to work, this much time to give to these kinds of issues. Not everybody can do ethical action all the time, and not consistently all the time. I don't know how to say it. Sometimes people, oh, Rebecca, there's so much to say. You were so right in what you're saying, what you asked. But this is not intended to say that people should start lobbying, but there are people who want to, and we're trying to find a way to give them some of the tools and ideas that maybe they can be effective at the local level as opposed to always thinking about the federal level. Even so, I think there is a point that you've made about multiple issues, multiple projects, multiple topics. Sometimes you get bombarded with so many different ideas of what you could be doing. You wonder, what do they want me to do? What are we supposed to be doing? And again, it has to be from your society deciding what it wants to do, or you personally, what can you do? You can only do what you can do, girl. So don't take this as pressure. It's just there in case somebody needs it or wants to use it. I hope that helped. I didn't say it very
Just
well.
before you close, Carolyn,
Yeah.
I'd just like to mention this. When you receive information, I'm talking about all societies, it has Lucy's Children on it. You can put a face to the person who is mainly in charge of it.
Yeah.
I want to thank Joan Johnson Lewis for asking me to gather a group, to form a group. And when I asked folks, they were there, and some have stayed. And this is one who hasn't left us. That's Muriel. I founded that group, and Muriel has taken it and ran with it. Sometimes it's 2 of us, sometimes it's 22 of us. So I just wanted to make note of that.
It's a great thing that you did in Brooklyn. Just really fine work. Thank you, Rita.
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen, you had your hand up earlier. I don't want to cut you off. We have a couple minutes.
I just had a question. Most of the work I've done is political, as in trying to prevent Trump from getting into the White House. Unsuccessful one time and successful another time in my own way. But that doesn't. And then we do a lot of
get out the vote with postcards and stuff like that. We do that at Ethical. But that doesn't seem to be what you're talking about here. Is that right?
Not particularly. I mean, there's several different ways to approach things, and if you're working on elections, and that may be at the national, or even it can sometimes be at the local level, but probably it's coordinated with the national campaign. Sometimes people are looking at inequality in the local area, and there's a time to look at what can your city council or your county government do about an issue. That's easier than going to Washington and try to influence someone who represents hundreds of thousands of people, and perhaps they have a smaller constituency. It's also easier in a smaller town than perhaps Manhattan. So yeah, that's another issue.
Yeah. Well,
But-
I never campaign in Manhattan because Manhattan is almost sure to go Democratic. I go to Pennsylvania.
Well, see, there you go. I mean, you're helping out in those places and where you're needed, and that's. But when there is an issue that you can have an effect on, sometimes, well, there's just lots to do with a decider. There's keeping them happy. There's thanking them when they do support what you're doing, giving them a little bit stronger backbone when they seem to be waffling on important issues, developing a relationship. You know, if you've got a really good senator, I mean, Chuck Schumer's pretty handy there, but, you know, he waffles sometimes. Maybe he needs an attaboy or a little encouragement. You know, we got your back on this kind of thing. There's an ongoing kind of relationship that includes positive interactions that matter. I have a congressman. When I first started paying attention to local politics, I was in school for a long time, so I didn't care. But when I graduated finally and started looking, the fellow Lloyd Doggett was my congressman in Southwest Austin. He started out on the state Supreme Court, then he was the state senator, and then he was elected to Congress. And eventually my work led me to have to meet him and talk to him about the issues related to HIV policy. And I went to AIDS Watch in Washington, D.C. to meet my congressman from Austin. And that was the beginning, in fact, with letters and handouts that I sent him, materials that I sent him over time, of a bit of a relationship. I mean, we're not close personal buddies at this point. But in Texas, you know, the district lines get changed a lot. I didn't move for nearly 40 years, but his district lines got moved pretty badly, and he wasn't my congressman anymore, except he was. I was still on his mailing list. He still answered my letters, and he responded to the issues that I had. So much so that when I moved to San Marcos, I moved back into his district and was very pleased with that. And recent redistricting in Texas, my state legislator said, you may get wiped out of may get moved out of my district, so I'll be representing a different area. But you will always be my constituent, just like Lloyd Doggett will always be your congressman. Now, she didn't know he was for sure, but she knew that that's the kind of relationship he had with constituents. And that says a lot about him. But it's also been very positive that I can write about the issues that matter to me and know that someone will listen. And he's been very effective on our issues that way. And I think that relationship has been a good one, a positive one, and an effective one over time. I tried with Lamar Smith, but that was not so successful. On the other hand, we were cordial, like that. Sorry.
Thanks.
Any Charles, you have your hand up? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Muriel and Carolyn. I'm Charles Innes, he, him, his, from the Baltimore Ethical Society. BeMoreEthical.org is our website. I'm here at invitation of our new president, Dr. Omawali Elson. who's a professor, a Bahamian gentleman, and he has motivated us all to do great outreach and try to reach many other people and contiguous organizations or travelers who support ethical and humane action in many areas. My organization does do lots of lobbying. We march yearly on the Martin Luther King Day Junior Memorial Parade. And we are also very active in dealing with legislation. And we have an active ethical action committee. And we're embroiled in also hot discussions about issues that are current, the culture wars, discussing microaggression and becoming an anti-racist organization, which is which is also inclusive. I am a blind person, and I would not want to be required to know what color a person is in order to be a member of an organization. So I would have to demur if someone said that becoming an anti-racist organization means that you have to know what color people are. I will follow and defend our wonderful Dr. Martin Luther King's teaching that we all aspire to be judged by the not according to the color of our skin, but according to the content of our character. And I thank you for this presentation today.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Folks, I think we've run out of time. Uh-oh, Norma. One last shot.
Yes. Okay, fine. I just wanted to personally thank both you and Muriel and everyone for their comments and contributions tonight. It was quite an education for me because social action is a program we're trying to revitalize at our community and something that I have not been personally very involved with. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for the work that went into this presentation tonight. The one thought that I'm coming away with is the importance of motivation, reaching out to our members and motivating them to become involved. However,
right.
we are also met with the challenge of numbers. You know, we're a small organization, and right now our board is very involved in a lot of business decisions that are relative to the survival of the group itself. So it's very hard to ask people to take on an additional role, but I'm hopeful that when those issues are resolved that we can move in that direction. But we are already making plans to do that as we speak. So thank you for the additional motivation for me to get things started.
Thank you, Norma. Let me offer this, and for all of you from very small societies that don't have many hands to do all of the work, there are many ways to take part in ethical action. How you live your life and treat the people around you is in fact an ethical action. You can do ethical action with giving, you can do it with serving, you can do it by, I call it educating, because I get in trouble sometimes when I go too far with the lobbying word. But there are always ways to be ethical, and very often that is an ethical action. You don't know who you're affecting and helping just by being kind and courteous and respectful in a day. So I count it that way. Thank you all for being here. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And it looks like we might get to do that again. So it'll be fun.
Yes.
Thank you,
Muriel.
Muriel. Thank you, Jan. Everybody. Bart.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
night.